Sega Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Trusty, and this podcast is about Sega Stuff only. I might ramble on and start talking about some other thing, hopefully video game related, but I'll try to stick to Sega the best I can. On today's podcast, I don't have very much Sega news because there hasn't been any Sega news since I last recorded, so it's been pretty quiet. At least on Sega.com's official website. There's a few things on other people's sites. I try not to pay too much attention to it because it can just lead to me being upset about it not being true. So, with that being said, let's talk about some retro Sega. So, I'm going to talk about a game for the Sega Master system called Phantasy Zone. And if you don't know about Phantasy Zone, it's a scrolling shooter. It's a side-scrolling shooter, and it was originally released in the arcade in 1986, and of course later ported to all kinds of different systems like the Sega Master system, which is the version I've played. It even came out on the regular Nintendo. It came out on Sega Saturn as part of a Sega Ages collection. It's been on the mobile phone, PlayStation 2, Wii Virtual Console, just tons of different things. There's probably PC downloads, all kinds of stuff. It's starring a character, or I guess a ship. It's like a living ship, spaceship called Opa Opa, and everything in the game is different than what you would expect to come out of a side-scrolling shooter. It's kind of Mario-ish, but even trippier because the colors are kind of Eastery. There's a lot of pinks and light greens and light blues and bright yellows and all these colors going on the screen, which is really impressive because the Sega Master System was a really good quality 8-bit system. It might be one of the best 8-bit systems. It's certainly better than the original NES. But that's a whole nother topic. You shoot these really strange-looking characters, like big heads with wings on them, strange, nonsensical enemies that just look weird, and you shoot them, and there's a store on the game. You can buy more weapons, which was pretty cool because it kind of made it felt like an RPG because you could upgrade your ship or your guy. I know he's like living. He has like feet sticking out of the bottom of him. Something, and it runs on the ground. You can run on the ground as well. So it's an arcade side-scrolling shooter, and it was really popular on the Sega Master System. I don't know about it in the arcade. I don't know if it came out here in the arcade or not, but I'd like to see the arcade version. I've seen screenshots of it, but I would like to play the arcade version. And I guess I could emulate it or something, but I just like to play the original one because I have it. So Opa Opa, the character in Phantasy Zone, has starred in a lot of other games, as well as a Japanese anime called Zillion, and which is also a Sega Master System game, and he appears in the game as well. So he does a lot of little things where he shows up in other things, like he's in Shenmue, he's in Sega All-Stars Racing, and I think he may be the fastest character. There was a Phantasy Zone reference in the Muppet Babies cartoon apparently as well. I'm reading here on Wikipedia, so that's pretty interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that. But it was a great game, and it still is. If you like side-scrolling shooters, check it out. There's not a whole lot I can say on it. It's not super deep. It's deeper than most shooters, which aren't that deep anyway. So, and that's why I like them, because it's just you can just pick it up and go, and they're usually pretty tough. And I like hard games, even though I suck at video games. But or maybe just I think all games are hard. That could be it. But anyway, the characters shoot at you. You have to continuously dodge their bullets. You can actually turn around and go left or right, which was interesting. And the camera would move so that there was more space in front of you. And it was a cool game. If you have the chance to check it out, I would. You can probably find it on eBay, or virtual console download is a good way to go. And of course, you have to have a Master System. So, yeah. Another cool thing I should say is when he blows up, when you die, which happens to me often, it kind of does this Mega Man thing where he turns into a bunch of stars, and it's like, it's really cool. But I think that's about all I've got to say about Fantasy Zone. So I suppose now's a good time to listen to a Sega tune. Enjoy. Okay, and we're back with the main topic today, and I'm going to talk about the Sega Master System, which is a third generation video game console that was manufactured and released by Sega in 1985, which was the year I was born. And it was released in 85 in Japan as the Sega Mark III, which they changed and brought it to America and Europe and called it the Sega Master System. The original Sega Master System, which is the one I've played, can play cartridges as well as these credit card sized Sega cards, which retailed for less, but they had less code, so the games weren't quite as complex. But I had some Sega cards, and there's some pretty decent games on some of those. And you can barely tell that there's not as much coding involved, because the games are still a really high quality. Anyway, yeah, it's technically superior to the NES because just the graphics are better. Well, no, I wouldn't say better sound, but the graphics are definitely better. There's less flicker. You can put more sprites on screen at once, and the colors are better. It's also just basically a big Game Gear that you can hook up to your TV, or I should say Game Gear is a small portable Master System, because that was released later. But they just basically had tons of games on Game Gear right off the bat, because they ported all these awesome, famous Sega Master System games like the Sonic the Hedgehog that was remade for the Master System was ported to the Game Gear, and that's the famous first handheld Sonic the Hedgehog game, and it was pretty good. The controller was a 2-button controller like the NES, and the D-pad was kind of square and not the best D-pad ever made, but the controller was pretty good other than the D-pad. The pause button was on the system itself, so you actually had to get up out of your seat, walk over to the system, and push the pause button in order to pause your game, which was pretty much a hassle, and it's horrible if you're playing something like Double Dragon, which is way too hard on the Master System, and you get up, go over there to pause it, and you're dead, because from the time it took you to get from your couch to your TV or wherever your console is, you've been hit by another bad guy, and it sucks. It makes you mad. So Nintendo definitely got it right by putting the start button on the controller there, and which came out before the Master System, I believe. So Sega really should have thought about that one a little bit more when they were designing that controller. But it's still a great system, and it's awesome to get if you're a Sega collector. What else is there to say? There's a lot of things, I guess. They came out with several Master Systems. I think they came out with a couple. I've seen a couple different kinds in America. But they came out with the Sega Master System after the Mark III. Then they came out with the Sega Master System 2, which was a little bit smaller and sleeker looking and had rounder edges. They also came with the Master System 3 Compact in Brazil. In Brazil, they had all kinds of different Master Systems there. They had a pink Master System. They called it the Master System Girl, and they had a Master System Wireless. So it had wireless control. It was like a controller that you put the game in and hooked up to your television. But that was pretty cool. I've seen pictures of it online and read a little bit about it. I don't have a Sega Master System anymore, but I did stumble across a power-based converter, which allows you to play Sega Master System games and the cards on your Sega Genesis. It down converts it to 8-bit graphics, so you can play awesome games like Fantasy Zone or Alex Kidd or Outrun or Space Harrier and many, many more. And Afterburner, which is another great Yu Suzuki title. But lots of awesome arcade games were put onto it, like Altered Beast, like I said, Afterburner and those. And it was kind of known as the arcade machine in your house, which the Nintendo was kind of known as an entertainment system. So they kind of had more educational stuff, a little bit more geared towards kids. And Sega, this is when they really first started getting the radical look, we're cool, and young kids and teenagers alike will love us. So they're like, they were really pushing that pretty hard. And they also had, I gotta say something about Phantasy Star, because Phantasy Star is amazing. It was amazing for its time anyway. You could go back and play it today and it's still pretty good, even though I find it fairly tough. Just when you first go into the first dungeon, the dungeon mazes are amazing. They kind of got this Shadow Gate for NES 3D-ish look done really well. And when you walk forward, there's an animation of the hallway, so it feels like you're first person. Also, the battles in that game were first person. And I can't say too much about Phantasy Star because that's a whole episode in its own. But, yeah, I'm going to talk about it later, but Phantasy Star is awesome. And it was a good competitor for Final Fantasy, I thought, but just, you know how it goes. It comes down to money and advertising and development and all kinds of things. So, yeah, they came out with a light phaser for the Sega Master System, which is Sega's light gun. But I've never actually gotten to play with it. I've seen them, and I don't have one. I'd like to get one. But they had a lot of accessories for the Sega Master System. They had that. They had the 3D glasses, which hooked into the card slot on the Sega Master System. So if you didn't have the original first Sega Master System or the power-based converter, you can't play the 3D games, I don't think, because you have to plug it into the card slot. And these were like active 3D LCD shutter glasses, which would rapidly alternate between left and right lenses, being opaque, so you could see through them left and right real fast, and you could barely tell. So it would show the image on screen opposite that, so that it would show up with this stereoscopic 3D effect, and it just worked really, really good. The game had to support it, but it was really cool technology that was used late, like just recently. It's being used and used later, and it's just another one of those great examples of how Sega is way ahead of their time. And yeah, Sega Master System, you could get it on eBay. It's not real cheap, but it's worth getting it if you're a Sega collector. If you're just a retro video game player, it's worth it because there are some really good games on it, and the games are really cheap. They go for like $2 a piece, or you could get a box of them for like $20. You get like 20 games in there. So that's the way to go, really. It's just to buy a lot of games. Go ahead and bid on a lot. Not a lot, but a lot. Or, you know what I mean? Like just a ton of games. And like just get a box of you can search for Sega games, or you can search for Master System games, or box of games even. It comes up with stuff usually. And that's a good way to get a lot of games. And you'll find a lot of other goodies in there usually, like you might find some Dreamcast VMUs or something. So you put all 4 controllers in your Dreamcast, plug in all 4 VMUs, and you'll have these 4 VMUs beeping at you. And it sounds beautiful. So, yeah, that's about it that's about all I'm going to talk about for the Sega Master System, because I'm just going to start rambling. I would like to talk about this website called j2games.com, and they sell new and classic video games, ranging from the Atari 2600 all the way up to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 and Wii. So they've got all these old games for like the Jaguar and the Vectrex, SNES, Nintendo 64, GameCube, Game Boy, and just the list goes on and on. Well, they have Sega Saturn games on there, Sega CD games, 32X games, Sega Genesis games, and Dreamcast games, as well as Sega Saturn imports on there sometimes. So that's pretty crazy that they carry all these games, and they're extremely well priced. Most of them are really, really fair, and I'm just randomly clicking on games here, and I see Tokyo Extreme Racer 2, which is one of the best Dreamcast games ever, and one of my favorite racing games of all time. It's $8.99, so j2games.com. Go check it out for good games, good game prices, and also I should mention I found out about J2 Games from listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Classic Leet. That's the Classic Leet podcast, Classic L337, and Tony and Scott are just doing an awesome job on that, and that's just like I've been listening to a lot of awesome podcasts, and they're one of my favorites. And at the moment, I'm listening to them every day because I just started on episode 1, and I think they're on episode like 53 right now, or they should be close. They're somewhere in the 50s, and I'm just trying to catch up. So luckily, I've been able to listen to them every day, and I'm going to be a little upset when I have to quit doing that and go down to the once a week or whenever they can upload podcasts. But go back and listen to them. The first episode is real. It's a good episode. It's full of good content, but you give it a little bit more time, and the production quality actually gets a lot better after time. So check it out. Check out Classic Leet. They're awesome. They talk about new and retro video games. It's modern games and retro video games. They put it together really well, and they have really cool guests on their show from time to time, and I could just listen to those guys talk all day. So Classic Leet, classicl337.com is how you can find them, and they got links to every one of their episodes. And yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and leave them a comment, tell them how awesome they are on there also, because I have never left a comment yet. And, yep, I'm going to do that. So as soon as I get off this podcast, I'll probably go do that. Yeah. So you can also check out my other podcast, The Sideburns Review, which is myself and my co-host Chris Lehman, where we talk about retro video games. That's my side of it, and he talks about obscure movies, and we go back and forth on those a bit, talk about a little bit of movie news and retro game news, which sounds weird, but there is a lot of retro game news because retro video games are just really coming back. So that's part of the reason I'm doing the Sega podcast, because I just love retro Sega games. So yeah, j2games.com, Classic Elite, L337.com with Tony and Scott, and Sideburns Review podcast. We've only recorded a couple episodes, so I'm going to have those up soon. I'm trying to get a lot of stuff done. I've got a YouTube channel. You can search for Bryan Trusty on YouTube, and my channel is called Bryan Trusty. That's me. And you can also search for the Sideburns Review on YouTube, and there is a Sideburns Review channel, and we're trying to do some stuff on that too, but that's going a little slow. So we just kind of try to go the podcast route, just worry about our podcasting right now. But yes, awesome. So hopefully on the next episode, I want to mention that my friend Mike is going to be joining me, and I hope to get him on as much as possible, because we can just talk about Sega all day long. Mike is one of my best friends from childhood and still to this day, and I called him up today and asked if he wanted to do the podcast, and he was like, yeah, dude, that sounds really good. So he was real gung-ho about it, which is cool, and so I'm real excited about that. Sega Stuff Episode 3, Mike Keltner will be joining me, hopefully. I'll try to get him. So, that's about those are the shout-outs, I guess, is what they call it. And j2games.com, classicelite.com, and check out my other stuff, Sideburns Review, YouTube stuff, all that. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of Sega Stuff. I'm out.